Hello Gobs and welcome to the first episode of my new series, which I have dubbed Final Fantasy Gob's Adventure. Now, kind of on the nose, but if you guys have a better title, let me know in the comments. For those who haven't seen my announcement where I have purchased all the Final Fantasies, this is the first episode of that series. Essentially, I'm going to review 1 through 16, excluding 11 and 14. They'll get their own thing, but if you want more info about what the series is going to be about, go check out that video. I'll try to put it in the cards. This is my reminder to put it in the cards, but that's what today's episode is going to be about. So, since I'm doing them in order, today's episode is going to be on Final Fantasy 1. Now, I have a lot to talk about today. I've been going over it in my head, and I'm very excited. So, if I seem rambly, or as I like to call it, yapping, then that's that reason. I'm just so excited. This game is very short, but I have a lot to say. It is the first episode, and, well, that's it. So I hope you guys are ready for a bit of a longer video. I think it's going to be longer. Strap in, grab your snacks, get ready for this long review of Final Fantasy 1. Now, with my game reviews, I tend to keep them lighthearted. I don't dig too deep into the game itself. I go over mechanics that stand out and anything that just stands out or annoys me. That's what shows up in these reviews. But today, I'm going to try to go over everything. Since it's the first episode, episodes going on, they might be shorter or longer depending on the game itself. But I know I have a lot to say about today's. So as a preemptive, thank you for clicking on the video. Thank you for what you will watch, even if you stop halfway. I appreciate the views, and if you leave a comment, I appreciate the comments. If you want to see more content like this, I do tabletop RPG stuff as well, but I've been doing a lot of video game RPG stuff recently too. I'm just doing RPG stuff in general because I love RPGs, so if that interests you, go ahead and subscribe. I also tend to put out the occasional non-RPG game video and other miscellaneous videos that come to mind. Kind of a variety, but the main focus is RPG. So if that interests you, go ahead, subscribe. You get to become a gob, and I'm just going to plug in everything now. Go check out my Reddit. I haven't done anything with it because we don't have anyone on there yet, so whatever. Then my Twitter is where I tend to do a lot of my updates, but now I've sort of switched over to YouTube for that. I post just about everywhere. I post my videos on Twitter and Reddit, so if you guys want to be updated and you use those social platforms, then go ahead and go follow me there. Everything's in the description. Without further ado, let's get into this first episode. I've already talked a bit about it, but today we are doing episode 1 of Final Fantasy Gob's Adventure. Today we are starting with the first one, Final Fantasy 1. I'm going to break down my review, how I review things, and if you want a more in-depth of it, go check out the Fallout 1 experience video. I break down the review system in the first half of the video, so if you want to ever see a more in-depth of how I rank everything, then go check out that video, and I might put it in the cards if I remember it. I like saying that, but then I forget to put them in the cards, so if you guys ever hear me say anything about cards, I guess leave a comment, and that helps me out. Remember to put sayings so people can go and click those. I'm excited. Let's just break down this review system so we can get into today's game, because I have a lot to go over. Starting with our first section, we have graphics, visuals, animations, then we have gameplay and mechanics, then we have sound design, voice acting, and music if applicable, and then finally we have writing. These sections are worth gold coins. Music and sound design is worth 2. Honestly, I should break it up, but it all kind of fits into how the game sounds overall. So it's going to be worth 2 gold coins just because I feel like sound design, or at least music is a big part for me, so that's why it's worth 2 gold coins. Then afterwards, I have a demerit/merit section where the game can earn more gold coins or take away gold coins. This is for super outlying stuff. If there's more things that show up in this section, then that means the game was super interesting or super awful. And then after all that, we go through our final thoughts, like if I would recommend it, any other outlining details that didn't quite fit in with the rest of the section, and then finally we give the final rating, and that's about the end of the video. Now, before I go on to the actual review, I always say this, but there might be spoilers. There's not really spoilers for this one. It is an old game and the story is rather simple, but I will get into it later on in the writing section. This is your spoiler warning if you are going to play this 40-year-old game now. But you know me, no matter how old a game it is, if someone's interested into it, then they should have the right to not be spoiled. But I tend to go on little tangents, so if you don't want to be spoiled, this is your warning. Of course, you can keep watching, and I always try to give a spoiler warning before if I consciously remember it. But just know that there might be spoilers throughout my talking. And finally, this is all my opinion. Final Fantasy has a place in my heart, but I'm trying to view it through a non-biased lenses. I am going to give it a critical eye, regardless of how I feel about the series. So if there's something that you like and I dislike it, or vice versa, something I like and you dislike it, that's perfectly fine. It's all my opinions. In fact, if something ever comes up and you vehemently disagree, go ahead and leave a comment. I do like to discuss with people in the comments if a comment ever shows up. I say that, but there hasn't been too many comments, but I do like reading comments. I read every single one, or at least I try to, and then I try to reply to every single one. I may even do a follow-up video depending on the variety of the comments and if it's interesting enough to make a follow-up video reading your guys' comments. So just know, every time you comment, there is a chance it may show up in another video, just in case you want to do something like that. Now, with the preamble out of the way, let's get into today's topic. Let's get into man, that is really hard to say. Let's get into today's first episode of Final Fantasy Gob's Adventure, starting at Final Fantasy 1. Now, with my game reviews, I tend not to go into the development of these games. I tend to let you guys go out and research it yourself, unless there's something particularly interesting in the development. Which, today, there is. There is something about Final Fantasy 1 that I found interesting, and I went and digged a bit more and learned more about it. I usually give a short description of the game, and then I go into who directed it, and if they directed anything else. So, let's start off with that. Final Fantasy 1 is a JRPG fantasy adventure. However you want to word it. Fantasy adventure JRPG. It's a role-playing game set in a fantasy universe. Final Fantasy 1 was developed and published by Square, formerly known at the time Squaresoft in the West. Final Fantasy was originally released on the Famicom in Japan in 1983 or 87. The copyright says 83, the Wikipedia says 87. Some things say 83, some say 87. It was released in the 1980s on the Famicom in Japan and was officially released in the English version on the NES in 1990 in America. Now, the interesting thing is, you heard of Final Fantasy, you probably heard the rumor or the myth that this was supposed to be Square's last game before they went bankrupt. I always wondered if that was true or, just a rumor that just gets spread around online. So I went and did a bit more research on it. The person who directed Final Fantasy 1, Hironobu Sakaguchi, sorry if I butchered that. Man, I've been reading a lot of Japanese names lately. Who would have guessed I'm a big fan of JRPGs, but that's the person who directed it. He also directed Final Fantasies 2 to 5. I don't know his exact ranking in the company. I don't know if he's the head of the company or if he was simply a director, but just know he directed Final Fantasy 1 for Square in the 1980s. Now, it is true that this was supposed to be their last game. This was supposed to be their last hurrah. After having 5 or 6 failed games released on the Famicom previously, would go on and this would be their parting gift. It would either save them from bankruptcy or they would fade into nothing. And obviously, it worked. How well did it work? It sold 600,000 copies in Japan. And then in 1990, when Nintendo brought it to America, it would sell over 700,000, beating out their rival competitor's game. Now, before I get on to the rivals, I want you to take a guess on who the rival company was. 5 seconds, or however many seconds, I'm not going to count it, but try to think. Done. The company that was supposed to rival them was a company called Enix, who would produce Dragon Quest a year before Final Fantasy 1 came out. The director, Sakaguchi, that's what I'm going to call him, it's a fun name to say, but Sakaguchi would see the success of Dragon Quest and the style of Dragon Quest being a fantasy adventure. He would want to make his own spin on the game, thus getting Final Fantasy. He would get a really famous manga artist. I think he made Vampire Hunter. Sorry, I don't know the name, I didn't write it down, but I think the manga he made is Vampire Hunter. You can always go look up the history of Final Fantasy 1. And popular Nobuo Uematsu. If there's anything about their failed games that people in Japan liked, it was the music. So he would get Nobuo Uematsu to do the music, they would get together, and they would make Final Fantasy 1. And today's money, they made a total of $56 million in today's money. I don't know how much it was back then, but that's a lot of money, and it definitely helped Square come out of bankruptcy. Now, just as a side note, this isn't on Final Fantasy 1, but you might be wondering where Square and Enix combined together to make the powerhouse that it is today. Because if they were the rival companies, when did they decide to merge? They would merge in 2003, while Squaresoft at the time, or Square, was working on Final Fantasy X2, and they would combine together to become a RPG powerhouse. So now, as Square Enix, they have both the Final Fantasy series, the Dragon Quest series, and a bunch of other series under their belt as well. But Dragon Quest and Final Fantasies were the biggest ones, so obviously they became a gigantic, like I said, RPG powerhouse. And that's it. It is the rumor behind Final Fantasy being, well, it was named Final Fantasy because it was supposed to be the final game that Square would put out, but it saved them from bankruptcy and makes them the okay game company they are today. So that's just a little bit on the history of Final Fantasy 1. Now, you might be wondering, oh, since it came out in 1980s, am I going to be easy on it? Sorta. It did have a heavy impact on the RPGs we have today, but I'm trying to not view it like that. That's kind of like giving brownie points. I mean, they're well deserved, so I'm automatically gonna give it a bit of leeway, but it should still hold up because we do have the original Super Mario, Dragon Quest, the first Zelda game. I'm not sure when all those came out, but they all kind of came out around this time, and they're all good games. So I'm going to view this game through the critical eye that I would nowadays with a bit of leeway. It's not bad or anything, just as a forewarning, so there's your little glimpse, but I'm not gonna tear into it too hard. I'm not gonna say it's the worst thing ever just because it was made in the 80s. So let's move on. We got the description of the game, a little bit of the history. Let's start with our first category, graphics, visuals, and animations. Now, I am playing the Pixel Remaster. The Pixel Remaster keeps the story intact and adds new mechanics and stuff to the game, among other things. I'm going to tell you when I'm talking about the Pixel Remaster, but starting out, for the Pixel Remaster for Final Fantasy 1, as you'll see with the other Pixel Remasters in the series, because they did 1 through 6, but they do go in there and they do have graphic options that you can pick from. Starting out, you can change the text between the classic text or a more modernized version. I personally prefer the classic text, and that's interesting. Graphics, the visuals of what's that option called there? Modernized and classic? Sure, let's see what it looks like back when it was an 8-bit with barely any color. Now, that's not exactly what I had in. I'm getting nauseous. Why is it so blurry? I like the CRT TV lines, but why is it so blurry? I'm playing on a 1920, 1080, 16:9, whatever aspect ratio monitor. And it's so blurry. Get it off. Switch it back right now. I'm gonna throw a fit. I enjoy when games do these remasters and you're able to switch between how it... I bet that sucked so hard. Whatever. I enjoyed that these games do offer you to look at how it was whenever It's not exactly how it looked around the time, because back then it would have been either black and white with some colors, because eventually they would get a colored version, then they would get a Dawn of Souls, which I'll get into way at the end of the video. But it's not a one for one. It's not going to look exactly as it did when it came out in '83. But I can appreciate that they put in the classic mode, because if you manage to hook up your system to a CRTV, I'd imagine that classic mode looks way better, because that's what it was originally intended for. But I played the game on the modernized version, because I cannot stand classic mode. There was points I tried turning it on in the video and it makes me nauseous. I don't know why. It's just because it's super blurry and I already have poor eyesight. I can appreciate in the Pixel Remaster that they do add a gallery option that shows you artwork or concept. I'm not sure what it is, but it does show artwork of the game that I'm not sure how you were supposed to get it in the original game. I'm sure there was a little booklet that you would have got that would have showed you these pictures, but these pictures are absolutely stunning. Now let's talk about the in-game graphics. I mean, it's easy on the eyes. There's nothing that stands out. The monster sprites are good. I think the visuals overall just look pretty good, as long as you play the modernized version and not the blurry mess that is the classic. Now, I did notice something. For being Final Fantasy, there's no iconic monsters. There's the behemoth, as you can see in the gallery post. There was a behemoth somewhere around there. I mean, you see the name behemoth, but I don't remember fighting the behemoth in the game, and I got 124 out of 128 enemies. So I guess I must have missed it somewhere. But even if the behemoth is in the game, there's no bombs, Marlboros, chocobos. There's not even a Moogle. Which makes sense because it's the first game. They haven't outright found their style yet. So I'm not going to hold it against the game. Just whenever those iconic creatures do show up in the later series, I hope they are pretty good. And then the other thing I like about this game, well, it's a half-like. I like the sprites. At least when they're these cute little iconic guys, such as the white mage, the black mage, even the warrior, and especially the red mage, which is my favorite sprite in the game. I just think they look really cool. Until you take what is known in the game, the Citadel Trials or the Test of Valor or something, you get an item, you take it to a dragon, and it basically upgrades the classes to these guys. I cannot stand looking at these guys. I don't know what it is. I think it's because there's too much of a big gap in my heart, or a big fill my heart, whatever, for the little sprites. Whenever I think of red mage, that's what I think of. Whenever I think of black mage, you know, the yellow hat, the face that you can't see with the yellow eyes, the blue cloak. Not some guy. The thief becomes a ninja, and then the warrior becomes a knight. I think the knight looks okay. And then whenever I think of white mage, you know, I think of the white robe with the red triangles, and then they become Jesus Christ? Is that not Jesus? Look, got the white robe, got the long hair that's red, but you know, it could have been brown at the time. And in the game, white mage wields hammers. Jesus was a carpenter. Carpenters use hammers. He uses healing magic and brings people back from the dead. He's using miracles. Okay, guys, this game is officially the best game, because you can have Jesus Christ on your team. You can have a ninja fighting alongside him. In all seriousness, I just would have preferred if they would have saved the small sprites. Of course, I think the Citadel of Trials, or whatever it's called, to get the upgraded classes, I think it's optional. I never tested it to see if you can play the game with the small characters, but getting these titles allowed the characters to wield better equipment and get the better spells later on in the game. So it's kind of necessary to upgrade them, but I just wish they would have stayed the small ones. I guess if you want to look at it, they do start off as youthful adventurers, and then this can kind of be seen as them transitioning into adulthood or whatever. Not adulthood, but they mature. They start to learn that their destiny has stakes, because at first they start out, they don't really know what they're doing. They have these crystals, they don't know what to do with the crystals, and this is kind of the midpoint of the game where they start to realize their destiny, and they start to assume more serious roles to take on this adventure. Oh no, besides the missing iconic creatures and whatever these guys are supposed to be. The visuals and all that get a gold coin. Moving on to probably the longest section, the most rambly section. I'm probably going to bounce all over the place since I've been mulling this over in my head, but we are getting into the gameplay and mechanics. Let's start off when you very first start the game. You get to assemble a party of 4 characters. Each one, you can assign them a class from 6 to pick from. You have Warrior, Thief, Monk, White Mage, Black Mage, and Red Mage. Each one does something different from the others, and obviously, it'd be kind of dumb if they all did kind of the same thing, which they kind of eventually end up doing. As the 3 marshals, they all end up doing the same, with the Warrior being the best. I did do a little ranking. Warrior's the best, White Mage is 2nd place, Black Mage is 3rd, or interchangeable with Red Mage. Black and Red Mages are at 3rd place. Then Monk, then Ninja. Because from what I've seen, I played in Dawn of Souls, I had beaten the game. In Dawn of Souls, I had used the Monk. The Monk didn't do anything. And then for this game, I had used the Thief. And the Thief really didn't feel like they did anything. Warrior, White Mage, and Black Mage sort of just carried the entire team. But I'll get on more onto the strategy of this game later on. Just know for the time, this was kinda new, because in Legend of Zelda, you play as 1 character, and in Dragon Quest, I'm pretty sure you have a set party. I'm pretty sure. Don't quote me on that. Regardless, it is pretty fun mix and matching these classes. So warriors can equip everything, all sorts of armor, all sorts of weapons. They can equip the heaviest armor, they can equip shields and the best weapons in the game at the cost of being only able to attack. They don't do anything else besides attack. They can use items, but everybody can use items, as opposed to the spellcasters. And that's sort of true for Monk and Ninja as well. They're kind of secondary martial classes compared to the Warrior. As you think of Thief, well, stealing is a pretty popular command in the Final Fantasy series, which I thought the Thief would get, but he never does. The Thief's only thing compared to a Warrior is they have higher agility and higher luck. So they find more, if I remember what the luck does, but they find more items often after battle, and they land crits often, whereas agility allows them to go first and increase their invasion, I believe. Which can be pretty good because Thief, I would rank a Thief over a Monk. A Monk's kind of like a mixture between a Warrior and a Thief because they have high agility. They definitely have high stamina because their defense is based off of stamina, but they can't equip the same weapons a Warrior can, whereas a Thief can kind of equip half the weapons a Warrior can. A Monk can only use unarmed or Monk weapons, and Monks don't equip clothes, but since they have a higher stamina, they don't really need the armor that a Warrior or a Ninja / Thief could get. Now for the spellcasters, quite simple. White Mage can get white spells, Black Mage can get black spells, Red Mage can get half white and half black spells. Red Mage can also equip stuff that a Warrior can. So they're like a mix of a martial and a spellcaster combined. If you can't tell, I believe this game is based off of D&D. I don't know what edition, probably Advanced or whatever out. I didn't look it up, but there are like mind flayers and stuff in this game. So obviously there is some type of D&D inspiration. There's purple worms and all sorts of other creatures. Green dragons, white dragons. You get the idea. I'm pretty sure this is inspired by D&D. I mean, they even have spell levels, which they dub MP levels, which I'll get onto later. After you have formed this party, you'll be started off on the world map. On the world map, you'll encounter random battles, as that's what most of this game is. Final Fantasy 1 is just random encounters to game, because no matter what you do or where you go, you will always be in a random encounter except for towns and a few safe places. But aside from that, random encounters. Battle after battle after battle after battle, and that's kind of the gameplay loop of the game. Now when you're in towns, you can buy stuff, rest at the end to recover your HP MP, buy new equipment, talk to people, learn lore, buy new spells. Each town has better stuff than the last town you go to, So it has the higher level spells, the better equipment, more items to buy from. The inn costs more on the next town that you go to, which matters until you get the airship, which you can just fly back to the first town for the cheapest end. Aside from towns and whatnot, whenever you get the airship, you don't encounter enemies in the sky. It's a world map. You travel around from town to town, either by sailing or flying or just simply walking there. Now what's the point? Well, you're walking to dungeons, which is the next category. In dungeons you have random encounters, but you also have other things such as, well, for being Final Fantasy 1, since it's such a simple game, it's more mazes rather than having puzzles or anything. Which, thanks to the Pixel Remaster, which I'll get towards the end of the section, just know the Pixel Remaster makes dungeons so much more bearable. They're already a doozy to get through due to the random encounters, because once you go so far, if you're not well equipped, you have to leave the dungeon and go all the way back to town, encountering battle after battle all the way there. And then finally, the last thing, from the world map, town maps, dungeons, you have the actual battle scenes. So let's get into battles. Whenever you are battling, you will have, well, you can see the commands on screen. You have attack, items, magic. There's a second window that has defend and flee. These are all pretty straightforward. Attacking in this game, not only does it do one attack, but based on the accuracy due to the weapons you equipped, or I think the agility set, the more accuracy you have, the more attacks they'll land. Not just one attack, but they'll land 1, 2, 3 hits, 4 hits, 5 hits, all the way up to 8 hits. It can then get haste to double the amount of hits. So accuracy, as you'll see in the equip screen through the gameplay, possibly on whatever's on screen, but accuracy isn't the chance to hit, it's how many hits the character will do. So the higher the accuracy, the better. Then you have items, standard stuff. You can use potions or use items that have spells on them, and you can use them in battle. This is especially good since you get Giant's Glove that casts Saber, a spell that increases accuracy and attack, but since the Black Mage learns it, it only casts it on himself. So the Giant Glove allows the other two martial characters to cast Saber on themselves. So item menu is pretty good. And then obviously magic, cast magic. Let me get into magic, as later on in the series, you would have MP points. You would have, like, in Final Fantasy 2, you have like 10 out of 10 MP points. Then the spells all have an amount of MP that you spend whenever you want them to cast a spell until they can't cast any more spells because they run out of MP. In Final Fantasy 1, they have MP levels. For each level, there are 4 spells that they can learn, but they can only learn 3 out of the 4. You can use the forget command from the menu to make them forget a spell if it turns out it's useless, so you can buy the other spell to fill that slot. Spell levels from 1 to 8. Obviously, this is definitely D&D heavy. I don't know if D&D at the time had spell levels, but this is definitely, and at least inspired by it. Because throughout the game, the more they level up, the more spell levels that they get. Not only from 1 to 9, but they can only cast X amount of spells from that level based on whatever their intellect stat is. Up to a maximum of 9 times for each level. Yeah. And then you can use ethers, ethers, whatever, to give 1 level back for each spell level that they have. And that's how magic works. You'll see some common stuff like Kier, Kiraga, Fire, Faraga, Thunder, Blizzard, iconic Final Fantasy spells. So it's nice to see here, but you won't see stuff like Reflect or Shell and other iconic Final Fantasy spells that I can't think of off the top of my head. Whatever, that's the magic. Then you have Defend. Defend is self-explanatory. You spend the turn to half the damage, but defend is extremely useless because if you're defending against an attack, you take half damage, but then the enemies are just gonna attack next turn. It's kind of like wasting a turn. I never defended the game ever. There's no need to. It's not like the bosses cast reflect on them, so now your physical units that can only attack, you could set them to defend, but bosses never do that. So defend is quite useless. You should have your units either attacking or casting some type of spell or using items. And then finally, the last action is flee. It flees. It gives you the chance to flee. You can't flee from boss battles, I believe. And that's all the actions in the game. Now, as turns go, you pick for each character what you want them to do that turn. Then based on their agility set, how quickly they act in combat. So if someone's really low on health, since white mages tend not to have a lot of agility, you should put your high agility characters to using an item, and then let the white mage heal the rest back when their turn comes. That's a gameplay loop. You pick an attack for each enemy, then the enemies also do actions, and then back and forth until you either beat the enemies, die, or flees. It's standard RPG stuff. I don't think I needed to go too deep in detail in that, but there it is. Now I wanted to talk about the strategy of this game, because in the beginning you kind of got to strategize a bit, but once you get haste and temper at, temper's at level 2, haste is at level 4, and that's about all you need, because the main point of this game, which is why this unit is the best, is buffing warrior. Since everything doesn't reflect physical or anything, or is technically, I guess you could say everything is weak to physical, you can just buff the crap out of the warrior, have your black mage cast haste on him, temper, have the warrior himself cast saber, and after that have the black mage temper and haste the next martial unit, and then the black mage just keep having him rebuff because the bosses will cast slow, and then you need to reapply heal. And then, if anything, have them use the item. Now you might be wondering, why don't you want them to use magic? First of all, my theory is that most bosses are immune to status effects, so I just don't do status effects against the bosses. And secondly, magic has raw power, but they can't hit 16 times like a warrior can. So a spell might do 300 and a warrior's one hit might do 100, but if the warrior's hitting 16 times, then they're doing 1600 damage as opposed to the black mage's 300 from their one spell. And it might be thinking, black mages are useless. Well, no, they are fantastic in the random encounters throughout the game, because you'll often go against a large group of enemies, anywhere from 1 to 12 enemies. So black mages are awesome because they have the Aga spells, or the Ra spells, Fyra, Lizera. They have spells that can hit all the enemies, so if you're in the water level, you can use Thundega to kill all the water enemies, and they are phenomenal at that until they run out of MP levels. But in the end game, when you have thousands of dollars to buy a bunch of cottages to use on the world map to recover full HP, full MP, or 99 Aethers that you can just use and make him drink all of them to get all his spell slots back. So black mages aren't useless, they're just not good at single targets, whereas warriors aren't good against groups, but they excel at single targets. It's all about how you want to build a team. The second martial really doesn't put out as much as the martial will, and then white mages, they do white mage things. Protect, raise evasion, heal, restore life, heal, and they're really good at healing the entire party or healing a unit back to full health with one spell. So that's why they're the second most important. And then since red mages can learn black spells up to 2 and 4, you can kinda just replace black mages with that, because the Pixel Remaster has a really good feature that just makes these tedious battles on the world map, at least, a lot better, and even in the dungeons, which I'll get onto that later. That's the overall gameplay strategy that it becomes towards the end game. So the first half of the game, you're thinking about what you need to do, and then the second half is kind of just devolves to that, just random encounters, attacks, hit them all, then you go to a boss, buff the crap out of a warrior, keep him alive, and then that's about it. But it's still pretty fun for the time it came out, because it is really nice to see those practical effects. I forgot to say it in the visuals, but I love the magic effects in this game. I love watching the thunder hit everybody, or the fire hit all the opponents, or even blizzard is awesome. And then your team can look like super crazy. You got red and yellow outlines while they're invisible. It's very fun. That's the core of the game. Some other things include, there's not really puzzles in the game as JRPGs tend to have. The real puzzle is trying to figure out where to go next. You kind of have to connect clues, but it's not too hard. You just have to pay attention to what the townspeople are saying. If you ever get lost, just go to a town and talk to everybody until you find your way. Of course, this is an old game, so there are tons of guides that you can just go look up and help your way through the game. But there are Pixel Remaster features that make this game so much more bearable That would be absolutely awful without them. But before I get into that, there's one more core component of the game, and that is conditions. Aside from attacks and taking damage, are conditions such as blind, like I said, slow, which regardless of accuracy drops the character to 1 attack, which sucks. And you can get rid of slow by using haste or having the battle end, and with most conditions, the battle ending does end it. But what's awful about this game, this is probably the biggest thing that I hate about this game, and it kind of makes it good because it adds a bit of more challenge to the game, and that is lingering conditions. Final Fantasy 1 is the only game where poison lasts outside of battle. Now you do have stone, which also does the same thing, and it kind of falls under this, but there are way more enemies that will poison you than there are enemies that will turn your characters into stone. Poison sucks, because early in the game, when you don't have access to Poisana or the money to buy antidotes, then you're kinda SOL, and you might have to spend a bit of time outside the town doing random encounters so you can get money to buy Poisana or antidotes, and it's better to keep both on hand. But in a portion of the game where you're traveling through a marsh into a marsh cave where almost all the enemies will inflict poison on you, they just need to do 1 damage to your character and then they can be inflicted with poison. And since poison lingers outside of combat, whenever you're walking around, especially if you sprint, they will take ticks of poison damage, I think. I'm not sure if it's 1 damage per step, but it sure does sound like it. You know, it wouldn't be so bad, because you would think maybe, oh, just go to an inn and sleep it off. But no, you cannot get rid of these unless you use antidote or a similar item like remedy, Poisana, or a similar spell like Karaga, which gets rid of ailments, or you could simply let the character die and then resurrect them. And that is what makes poison sucks, because you think, oh, go outside and sleep in a cottage and recover full HP. That doesn't get rid of poison. Same thing with if they turn to stone. They turn to stone, you have to use a gold needle or stona. So poison is super annoying in the early game, but once you get Poisana and a crap ton of money to buy a bunch of antidotes, then poison never really becomes a problem ever again. Luckily, they would go to fix this on in Final Fantasy 2 and forward, having poison end after the battle. So thank you, director, thank you, developers, for making that decision. Now, let's get into what the Pixel Remaster adds, that some of it drags the game for me, but the others, the Pixel Remaster definitely makes the game super bearable, and probably why you can beat the game within 10 to 20 hours, depending on how well you know what to do. So let's start with the thing I hate most about Pixel Remaster, and that's the auto-saving. Whenever you leave a dungeon, I think, or whenever you go to the world map, the game will autosave. So if you ever get wiped out in a dungeon, instead of having to restart at your save, you restart at the autosave, or you could just always load back to that save. I never needed to use the autosave. Look at me flex. Oh wow, I never died throughout the entire game. Oh, how amazing! I'm so good. That's why I'm the king. But jokes aside, I can see why they added autosave. It's for casual people who forget to save, because sometimes I forget to save in the world map. It's kind of like playing in Skyrim, because you'll like exit a building and then like 3 hours later you'll die and you're like, oh, when's my last save? And then you notice it was 3 hours ago after you left a tavern. So it's not like exactly cheapskating it, but since you can already save on the world map, it's not that big of an issue. I just wish there was a setting to turn it off, because I kind of like, I'm not a purist who like, you have to play with the original mechanics, but as long as you don't use boost, I look down on you if you use boost, because the game is set perfectly that you would never have to use boost to go and farm, unless you played the game before and you just want to see something else, whatever it is. There's not tons of secrets in this game, but boost, essentially you can turn up the amount of XP and gold you use, and even turn off encounters, which I did once because I wanted to show the chaos fight, and I didn't want to have to sit through the encounters. I just wanted the chaos fight, and I had already beaten the game, so I just turned off encounters and went to the chaos. I'm like, wow, that's really convenient. I can see why it would be convenient to more casual gamers. Guys, it's a single player game. Play it however you want. I don't care. Go ahead and look up a guide bit for bit, and even finding the best equipment or whatever. Do whatever you want to do as long as it's fun for you. Anyway, so let's look at the 2 Pixel Remaster features that make this game so wonderful. The first one is Auto Battle. Now, on the gameplay that you're seeing, you'll see at the right side of the characters' names, they'll have their actions that they just took. Whenever you turn on auto battle, whatever action they took last turn, they'll keep taking it over and over. So it can be a double-edged sword if you accidentally use magic, and then you go to auto battle, and then they start using magic until they run out of MP levels. You can stop it at any time, but if you're not paying attention and you like turn away to do something because you're just trying to get across the world map in your boat and you're just running into whatever, boat encounters don't ever level up, so they're super easy, and you're like, I don't care about fleeing. It's easier just to hit square and let it go to auto battle and let them do the attacks. But it's also really nice in dungeons because if you encounter groups of enemies and you run out of MP levels to hit all the enemies at once, you can just switch it so they attack. Or, if you really want to, you can just set everyone to flee, and then whenever you start a battle, you can just hit square, and the auto battle will just make them all flee. Even if it fails, they'll just keep letting them flee. So I love auto battle. It makes it so good. Like I said, when you're crossing the world map, you're just trying to get to another place, especially in a low level area that you're revisiting. The battles are super easy, so you can either set them to all attack or just flee. Whatever. I love auto battle. The feature in Pixel Remastered that makes the game the most awesome thing ever. I mean, it's the reason that you can even beat the game in a timely manner, and I can see hardcore lovers absolutely hating this feature, but I love it, and that's the dang mini map and map feature. The original game, I'm pretty sure, doesn't have a map feature at all, because these old games, they padded it out by, like I said originally, making the dungeons into mazes. There are tons of rooms that are empty, and there's a lot of paths that are dead ends and straight up just mazes. And the only thing they're there for is to pad out the game, because you get into encounters that use up resources, and then you get lost, and then once you get lost or run out of resources, then you have to leave the dungeon, refill your resources, or even head all the way back to town to rebuy your resources, and it all adds like an extra hour or two. But with the map and the mini map, you can actually see where to go in the dungeon. Now, it's not going to tell you the path, but you can see what's a dead end and what's not. And then even a better thing, and certain dungeons, there's big rooms that just have tiny rooms, and these rooms contain either nothing or chests. So you can walk into one of these, open up the map, I can see if there's chests in the other rooms to see if it's worth it to make it over there. Now that kind of takes the exploration out of the game, but overall it gets rid of the tediousness of having to already go through random encounters to game. So I love the map feature. I don't care what anybody says, and I think that will do for gameplay and mechanics. I broke it down a bit more than I think I had to, but since it's such a simple game and it kind of revolutionized RPGs, I just wanted to really get into it. So obviously it's going to get a gold coin. And that's the longest section, guys. I promise you it's all going to get short from here. I did forget to mention, if you ever get tired of random encounters, you can always hop on your ship and go off and hold X, and I kid you not, press circle or whatever the back command for you is. You can press it 22 times and you get a little mini game, and that's it. It's just a mini game in the Pixel Remaster. And the old one, you used to get gil and items out of it, but also in the old one you had to do it 55 times instead of 22. So I couldn't beat it. I didn't want to look up how to beat it, so I just gave up. I just wanted to make a mention of that. Let's move into our next category: sound design, voice acting, and music. Now, in this category, I always tend to start off with voice acting, so should really be voice acting, sound design, music. I think sound design is overall. And obviously, this game is from the 1980s. It's not going to have voice acting. But on a weird little side tangent, it not having voice acting kind of plays into it, because whenever there's text on screen, you feel that voice and that character in your head, or you could even act it out loud if you're imaginative. I think if you're not imaginative, it can kind of take it away. Some people love having voice acting, but from all the new age indie games that I've seen, some of the voice acting just sucks, and it should just better off be silent. So there's a bit of charm in these old games, because Final Fantasy didn't get voice acting up until Final Fantasy X. Now, they did have songs that had people singing in it, so there were songs with lyrics, but for the most part, they didn't really have the storage to contain voice lines. So it just makes, whenever you do hear songs with actual lyrics in it, it kind of catches you off guard. Eyes on Me in Final Fantasy VIII really caught me off guard, but that's it. That didn't impact my Final Fantasy 1 standing or anything. it's 1980s, of course it's not going to have voice acting. And then for the sound design, with this category I always tend to reiterate, I'm not an audiophile. I don't really care about how well it sounds as long as it doesn't sound bad on the ears or there's some annoying sound in the game. Like later on in one of my favorite RPGs, as you're walking around the world map, the character will constantly take a breath and it's super annoying, and that's kind of what I'm looking for in sound design, is annoying sounds, bad sounds, or straight up no sounds when there should be sounds. In this game, everything sounds fine. I'm sure the Pixel Remaster redid some of the sounds, but everything sounds fine, nothing to it. And then the music, I have to say the music is going to be the only thing I'm biased in for the most part, because it's made by the goated composer Nobuo Uematsu, and I listen to his stuff all the time, be it the original song or a cover from like 14 or some other individual artist. So for the most part, I love the music. I don't prefer the 8-bit in Final Fantasy 1. The 8-bit doesn't really do it for me. I do love the arrangement. It reminds me of Distant Worlds, and I love Distant Worlds. I recommend going checking out their stuff, and that's kind of why it's biased, because I went and saw Distant Worlds in real life, and one of the best moments in my life. It was super amazing. So I love the music in this game. The Pixel Remaster, that's one of the main things. They rearranged all the music, and it's still Nobuo Uematsu who did the composing for the music. So it's not like brand new songs. It's just taking the old songs and making them sound, not 8-bit. But even the 8-bit, it's put together well. I find myself humming the battle theme as it's playing, as your iconic victory fanfare. First game to have it. You can call it the gold standard, and it has the Final Fantasy main theme, the piano chord that's on almost all other Final Fantasy games. It really set it good. So obviously this section's gonna get 2 gold coins. Now, the music isn't like outstanding or anything like in later entries, but it's still good all around. Moving on to writing. I have to get myself ready for this, because I'm giving you guys the full synopsis. So if you don't want to hear the story in full, then I recommend either skipping forward, and that's about it. This is your spoiler warning. For it being a 1980s game, the story, well, it's not going to be anything in-depth because they didn't have a lot of memory to work with, but the story itself, I think it's still pretty good. You guys be a judge for yourself. I'm going to try to do this all off memory. So here is the entirety of the Final Fantasy 1 story, including all the little adventures that you are going to do. The adventure starts off with the game telling you that the world is basically going to hell. The earth is rotting in various places, monsters are stampeding everywhere, the winds have stopped in the desert, the rain is, I don't know. Like I said, the world is going to hell, and there was a prophecy of 4 warriors with crystals to show up, and then you start off the game as the 4 warriors with the crystals. You go up to Cornelia, go visit the king. The king says, "Oh, my knight Garland has stolen the princess. Can you go get her back and I'll rebuild the bridge?" Go off to the Chaos Shrine, kill Garland, get the princess back, take her back to the castle. She gives you the loot, the king rebuilds the bridge. You cross the bridge, you could go up to this cave. This old woman's complaining that she lost her eye, somebody stole her eye. Side note for later. Then you go over to this town. This town is being taken over by pirates. Kill the pirates. The pirate captain has a change of heart, gives you a ship. Take the ship, sell it down, go to Elfheim. Turns out the prince is under a curse by the Dark Elf King, and now they want you to revert it. So now you have to go find the Dark Elf King. Travel out of the town, go up north. Oh, there's a king in this ruin. He was cursed by the Dark Elf King to lose his kingdom. He asks you to retrieve his crown so he can restore everything back to normal. Go down south through the awful marsh, awful cave, get the crown, take it back to him. What a surprise! The king is actually the Dark Elf King, and you just gave him his power back. Slay him, because he's super easy. Get the eye. Don't go back to Elfheim. Oh, who needed an eye? Well, go all the way back to Cornelia, go to the north, give it to the lady, the old witch in the cave. She gives you a energy tonic. Take the energy tonic to the prince. The prince wakes up, gives you a mystic key. Now you can go back to the king's ruins and Cornelia, open up the doors that were originally sealed by magic, grab nitro powder, take the nitro powder to the dwarves blow it up, open the canal. Now you take the canal to this town where the earth is rotting. They say find the vampire to undo it, so you go down, kill the vampire. Surprise, the earth doesn't stop rotting. So you find the earth ruby, take the earth ruby to the golem. Then you go past the golem, go down south to this old man, get the earth rod, take the earth rod back to the cave, fight the earth fiend. Woohoo, you restored the earth crystal. Are you guys having fun yet? Does this story sound interesting? I hope I'm telling it fast enough. Here, let's keep going. Travel to the east, you go to a town, there's these old men singing in the rings. Talk to each one, they all tell you about lore about the place. One of them gives you a canoe, take the canoe to a volcano, defeat the fire fiend, restore the fire crystal, travel up the river north, go to the crescent, go into an ice dungeon, get the levy stone, go down south to a desert, get the airship, take the airship. And I have to do a bunch of things here. Go north, start with the Citadel Trials, get the new title so you can get the better equipment and spells. Then you go east, go to the waterfall, get the warp cube, then you go to this town. Oh, turns out there's a person with a barrel who needs to go to the shrine. You need to go to that shrine. Well, you go to this town in the mountains. They have a fountain that has a crystal or this material that lets you breathe underwater. Oh no, the fairy's missing. This douchebag sold it. Go back to the other town where the person told you about the water shrine. Go to the desert there. Go north into this random area. The guy's selling the fairy for 40,000 gil. Take the fairy back to the spring. She goes, oh, thank you for saving me. Here's the oxygol, or that material that you need. Then you go back to the water shrine, restore the water crystal, get the Rosetta Stone, take the Rosetta Stone back to the earth rotted place, talk to this professor. This professor teaches you an entire new language in under 1 minute. Fly back east. You have to park way up north because the Lutherian city is surrounded by trees, just more padding. Go down, talk to them, they give you the chimes, learn more about who they were. They used to rule in the sky until Tiamat came. Cool, you got the chimes, you got the warp cube, travel back to the upper middle part of the map, travel through the desert, go to the Mirage Tower, use the chimes, climb the tower, use the warp cube, get into the fortress. Stay with me, guys. I swear there's a reason behind all of this. Just stay with me. You can even put the video on 2x speed. I'm going as fast as I can. Stay with me. We're almost there. Go to the Flying Fortress, fight Tiamat, obtain the final crystal. All 4 crystals have been revitalized. Go to the Chaos Shrine, use the 4 crystals, travel back in time, go through the gauntlet of all 4 fiends, one after another as you travel through many dungeons that each have enemies representing from them. The 4 fiends now have new moves, they're stronger. Kill them all just like you would everything else. Go warrior, go warrior, go. And then finally you get to Chaos and he tells you he is Garland. Yes, what a surprise. The person that you killed has been sent back to the past. He tells you how he has started a time loop. Yes, the 4 warriors came and killed Garland, but the 4 forces of the planet, which is earth, wind, fire, water, yeah, that sounds right. Basically, the forces sent him back in time, he recovered back in time, then he would become Chaos, send the 4 fiends to the future to rescue himself. The 4 fiends would then use the forces to send that Garland back so that Garland can become Chaos and perpetually stuck in a time loop that has now gone on for 2,000 years, I believe. Kick Chaos's butt, sever the time loop, and then everything goes back to normal. And then essentially all those adventures of helping all those people never happen. It's kind of like Samurai Jack going to the future, and well, eventually he goes back to the past, says Aku, so everything he did in the future technically didn't matter besides him. It makes him a better person. Whatever. I'm not gonna talk. This isn't about Samurai Jack, but I kind of drew the similarities there. And then the game tells you that the adventure wasn't totally for naught, because their adventure would be remembered as a fantasy until the end of the peaceful era. I guess you could say it was the final fantasy. Gold coin. Final thoughts, final ratings. We don't have any demerits or merits because this game didn't do anything outstanding. I mean, it did impact how RPGs would become, but that's not what we're basing it on, because it got a 5 out of 5. That's the final rating. Boom, 5 out of 5. Would I recommend this to Final Fantasy fans? Sure. I wouldn't recommend Fallout 1 if you go and watch that. I didn't recommend Fallout 1 to Fallout fans, but I can recommend this one because it is interesting to see where the game originally started. I guess you could say that for Fallout 1 as well, but this game only takes 10 to 20 hours to beat if you know what you're doing. And if you really want to, you can turn on boost, especially the pixel remasters. And even if you didn't have the map of the pixel remaster, you can always just look it up online and get through the game. It is a pretty well-rounded game. There's nothing outstanding. I think it's pretty fun. Personally, I prefer the Dawn of Souls version because Dawn of Souls for the GBA essentially takes Final Fantasy 1 and 2, puts them on the same cartridge, updates each game with some new stuff. In Final Fantasy 1, they add a new dungeon that has 4 really hard bosses with 4 really good rewards for beating those bosses, and its style is updated. I'm pretty sure they include iconic Final Fantasy monsters in that one. I wish they kind of remastered the Dawn of Souls version of Final Fantasy 1 instead of the original version, but both are pretty good. So yeah, the game gets a 5 out of 5. If there's anything you agreed on, or if you disagreed on something, or if you just found the video entertaining, let me know in the comments below. If you want to see more stuff like that, again, like I said, I do a bunch of RPG stuff, so go ahead and subscribe. If you prefer this more detailed review as opposed to my other lighthearted reviews, well, that sucks because I'm only doing it for the Final Fantasy series. So subscribe so you can see all 14 games. So I'm not doing 11 or 14. They'll get their own little episode, but they're not going to get reviewed because I'm definitely not paying for a subscription to play 14. If you're going to be mad about that, then comment in the comments below and I will be sure to like it. I think that's it, guys. I can't think of anything else I want to say about Final Fantasy 1. I hope you guys have enjoyed this video. Stay tuned for more. Check the Twitter, check the weather. Check the weather? Yeah, I guess check the weather so you don't freeze outside. And then after that, go and check my Reddit, where I will do something with eventually. I don't know. Let me know in the comments. Man, I just love comments, guys. I wonder why. It's definitely not because it affects the algorithm or anything. I hope you guys have a lot of a day. See you in the next fantasy adventure. Final Fantasy Gobs. See you when God can think right.